Welcome. This is the meeting dedicated to the results and the planning of Peaceful Futures project that has started about half a year ago, but probably has been in hearts and minds of many people attending the session today. It is dedicated to exploring what are the possible pathways into the future where wars are no longer needed, where we can create a peace-based global civilization, and where we find different, let's call it engine or principle of development of our global society and local societies that will still have conflict, but will not have violence, will not have destruction as one of necessary elements of our collective existence. And so that has been the topic of exploration, which brought people from, I think, over 40 countries altogether during the many sessions that we had in the last half a year. And the project has been initiated by a group of partners, which included School of International Futures, Next Generation Foresight Practitioners, VZOR Lab, and Global Education Futures. And later we had two more partners joining us in a very active role, which were Future World Center, another international organization, and Eco-Civilization. And we will hear from each of the partners in terms of what they have learned. But let me first invite each of you, dear partners, to maybe share like very quick, like 1 minute thought about what you are doing and like what's your inspiration about this project. And may I first invite Abby, who represents School of International Futures.
Thanks, Pavel. I'm pleasure to be here, both for those that are with us in person today, and also hopefully the many people who are going to watch this following the session as well. So just in terms of a little bit of context, the School of International Futures is a collective of practitioners working to drive fairer futures for current and future generations. And we do this using futures and foresight, which are structured ways of thinking about the future that generate evidence and possible futures and provide a space to imagine and create preferred futures as well. So it's both a science and an art. And we do this for a number of reasons, but two quick ones that I'll just share. One, that it helps to build credibility and evidence around what the future might look like so that we can be more resilient, more prepared. But also it's a way of making the future more participatory and democratic. So giving agency to citizens to be involved in the futures of their communities, in their nations, in multilateral planning and decision making as well. So that's what we do. We do some direct work through advisory work, capability building, but also we weave networks together because we know that complex issues like the one that we're talking about require coordinated and decentralized responses. One of those networks, and I'm going to speak on behalf of the NGFP, the Next Generation Foresight Practitioners Network as well, which is one of the other partners in this coalition, is a network of 600 individuals from over 90 countries, of which we've got a couple on the line today. So Jerome and Elijah are both members of that network, and you'll hear hopefully from both of them later, who are doing incredibly varied work around the future, ranging from questions like how do we collectively regulate and manage the risks posed by AI and emerging technology, through to how can young people and citizens better engage in climate negotiations and energy transitions. So our job is basically to work on the issues with members like those in the room, and you'll hear from VZOR Lab as well, who are members, about the issues that they care about. And where we sort of come into this story around peaceful futures is that last spring we were approached by a group of members who, catalyzed by the war in Ukraine, wanted to collectively ask the question, what would it take to transition away from our military-industrial complex and the current world where we have 27, I think, current world conflicts towards a more peaceful future? So SWAF works with partners and communities in quite a lot of related sectors. We work in nuclear security, we work in the humanitarian space, we work in the multilateral governance space. And so for us, this is a really exciting, it's not an exciting context, but it's an exciting prospect to be able to bring together individuals from across our communities and different types of expertise to be able to work on a shared issue together. And we're so grateful for the collective, because it's really been a huge sort of effort from VZOR Lab, from Global Education Futures, and from many champions, of many of whom are in the room, to get us where we are today. So Pavel, I'll hand back to you, and hopefully that sort of gives a sense of who we are and why we're excited.
Thanks a lot, and thank you also for introducing Next Generation Foresight Practitioners, which was a really important part of this effort. And I would like to invite Anna Peplova to say a few words about VZOR Lab and its motivation. I think VZOR has been really crucial in making the whole project happen and been the driving force, very inspirational driving force of the whole project.
Thank you very much. My name is Anna. Yeah, I'm a part of VZOR Lab and the part of Peaceful Futures team. And thank you very much, partners, that you are doing this all with us. Yeah, we initiated this dialogue when the Ukraine happened and everything that is happening in the world. And we wanted this to be a kind of international, independent community for the dialogue about how we can make our futures with peace. We at VZOR Lab personally do projects in the intersection of arts and science and technology, and mostly in educational field. And we are really eager to see what we can do for our common peaceful futures. And thank you, Pavel and Tabi and everyone who are involved in this communication.
Brilliant. I suggest we hear later from other partners who stepped in to support the process, including Future World Center and Eco-Civilization. And right now I want to share with you some of the findings, the premises and the findings of the project, and we'll explore them through contributions of the partners. But I want to highlight that this session has dual purpose. So one purpose is that we are sharing what we have learned so far. The second one, we feel that we have just started this journey of making peaceful futures real. And if we are serious about it and not see it just as like a fantasizing, but more like a practical work that can lead to systemic transformation, we need to start thinking how we bring that vision into reality. And that is the question that we would like to discuss in the second half of our conversation today. What are the practical initiatives that can be taken in year 2023 and perhaps towards year 2024? There are some funders that are really interested to support these efforts. Sorry, I will ask people to mute if possible. We want to collectively explore. What do we think is really needed? Like, where do we want to go together? So that will be the second half of the conversation, where we will turn the table, so to say, switch the regime, and we'll move into collaborative discussion. But right now, let us first of all show you what we have got so far, because there has been a lot. And I'll start with the presentation, and then I'll invite colleagues to contribute on their additional ideas that have emerged. 1 second. And by the way, some of the art that you see in this presentation has been a collaboration between humans and non-human creative agents. So we have been using Midjourney and other generative AI to inspire us and get some vision of what is that possible future we are talking about. And even the logo of the project that you will see through the presentation has been created by the AI. So it's really inspirational to see, okay, we can move to a different modality of relations with technosphere, with other humans, with our planet. So first of all, beginning with the premises of this project, indeed, this was triggered for many of us coming from the area that has been affected by or perhaps the largest military conflict of 2022 and the largest in Europe since the end of World War II, which was the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And we were very deeply concerned. I, for one, have ancestors coming both from Russia and from Ukraine, and also from Latvia. These have been in situation of these kind of rifts between different ethnic groups for centuries. So even on a personal level, I hold this question: how can we coexist peacefully, and how can we make sure that these kind of conflicts don't happen in the future? But as we began discussing with people around the world, they expressed the concern that we should not only focus on specific conflict because really wars never stop, and there are regions of the world that experience wars almost every year or every other year. There are some risks that are constantly running through the existence of people in those areas, like Latin America and especially Africa and some parts of Asia are affected by this significantly. So we need to recognize that there are 27 wars happening right now. And part of the story is that impact of these wars on societies, on infrastructure, on nature is increasing every year because the lethality of weapon and the forms in which this war is conducted are expanding. And we already know for the last 60, 70 years, the risk of new global wars can become massively devastating. In 2022, the idea of a possible thermonuclear conflict that will be happening on a global scale again came to the agenda of people. They started to recognize, yes, we're sort of back to the age where major superpowers are kind of showing each other their ability to destroy the whole planet. Do we really want to live in a future like this? Can we do something about it systemically? And that is the question that will increase in relevance year by the year, because there will be so many more causes for new conflicts to happen. And of course, the climate change is one of the critical aspects of that, because in the next century, over 2 billion people will be affected by climate crisis. There will be massive areas that will be flooded. There will be massive areas where currently agriculture is, they're like food baskets of the world. That agriculture is dominant activity there. There are a lot of people that live in those areas, like millions and hundreds of millions. All those areas will probably become uninhabitable, and people will have to migrate. And as we know, migrations and similar processes are always causing massive social tensions. So this is a risk that is very, very present. And we have to recognize that given the growing impact of weaponry and the growing possibility of future global conflicts to happen around the world, we are entering into a stage which will be very turbulent, which will actually jeopardize the whole humanity. And Buckminster Fuller famously said that either the war obsolete or the humans are. So we decided that we need to really start breaking this vicious circle. And we're not the only ones. There are many people that are trying to do it. But part of the story is that we need to start imagining the possibility of a world without wars and start charting a course towards that kind of reality. Of course, the question rises whether that is possible at all. Is war inevitable? And some people say that historically we have always been at war. Violent conflicts are part of human nature. We are, by our genes, by our upbringing, are killers. And that's the story that has been running for centuries, that war is part of human nature. In fact, we, as civilization, begin to discover that this is not entirely true. That indeed war has been dominating form of human interaction in the relatively recent human history, like the last few millennia. But in terms of larger, bigger human history, which takes hundreds of thousands of years since the emergence of Homo sapiens, or maybe a few million years if we talk about Homo genus in general, those types of conflicts were not a dominant form of our collective existence in the past. And there is evidence that humans managed to live peacefully, and there were civilizations like Indus Valley civilization or Caral civilization in South America that existed for hundreds of years, in occupying very large territories, but in very peaceful coexistence with neighbors. And that is the historical fact. And now going into the present reality, we start to see again that maybe there was a period in human history when wars were seen as something beneficial for societies. Right now, the tendency is that wars are no longer beneficial for the majority of population. They're still remaining as benefits for few, like some people from military-industrial complex, or people that will benefit from post-war economic situation. But for majority of population, it's even in countries that engage in the war as offenders, it's never bringing any benefits. So that's the reality. Why wars persist is a question, because the world doesn't need them anymore. We can't find an alternative way of being. And so that has been the question which we started to explore, looking into, on one hand, long-term perspective, 50 years into the future, can we make the society that doesn't require wars at all? At the same time, what can we do right now? What are the practical actions that we can take right now to make it happen? As I have mentioned, a number of partners, this is not the full list, but these were the essential partners that really made the project happen up to this date, stepped in to explore it, and we had a series of conversations from the beginning of autumn with different, let's say, modalities of our work, including very innovative methods such as structured democratic dialogue, to explore what can be the roadmap of moving into peaceful futures. And as I move into discovery, first of all, I would like to explore what is the notion of peace that we need to think about. There are so-called negative definitions and positive definitions of peace, and this is a relatively novel idea that came into peace making practice about a decade ago. The idea that up till recently, the idea of peace was defined by the absence of war. So, which means that war is a normal state of being, and absence of war is peace, which sometimes happens when there is no war. But of course, if there is a war, there is no peace. So probably that type of peace is what we can call type 1. So looking for this kind of peace, we need to find ways to eradicate wars, to make wars obsolete. That is the first type of peace that has to prevail in our society. But to make it happen, we need to look at the root causes of why wars happen at all. They happen because we have all kinds of systemic violence running within societies and across societies, between different nations, between different regions. It can be economic violence, political violence, also intergenerational trauma. So different reasons why violence prevails as a form of interaction between humans. So let's call it type 2 peace, when we make sure that systemic violence is not in the system anymore. And that brings us to the deeper understanding of what peace is, which probably also comes from spiritual tradition, the idea of peace as tranquil, harmonious state of being that can come on a personal level, but also on the collective level. And of course, each of these types of peace has different sources of disruption. Like some of them are disrupted by the presence of forces that just want wars to happen. Some of them are more subtle, like we have, for example, egoistic tendencies, which lead us into conflict dynamics with one another. And I'm talking about the type 3 peace here, like what disrupts the tranquility, what disrupts the harmony between the different human beings and maybe with non-human nature. So those three definitions were informing our journey into discovering how can we make peace real, because if we want to create a peaceful future, we need to hold all three of them. And we have recognized that we cannot expect big political forces, diplomats, United Nations, governments, Facebook, whatever, all those large entities, we cannot expect them to do this work for us. The transition to peace is actually a collective evolution of culture, evolution of governance system, and it needs to happen on many layers of our society. But it comes also from the level of that is grassroots, from level of people, rather than from level of this large structure. They are enablers, but they are not drivers of the peacemaking process. And so as we explored these ideas, we created a kind of roadmap. This is not the roadmap. It's more like let's say a bigger representation of key streams of activities. There are over 60 elements in this roadmap that we have co-created during the journey, which shows us how we can transit from current state of the world into peaceful future in roughly 50 years by adopting a range of strategies. And some of them work directly with elimination of war-related practices, like working with military-industrial conflicts, removing ideas that wars can be beneficial for society, and so on. At the same time, a lot of work needs to happen on governance systems, including strengthening of democracy and grassroots participation, and activities such as, for example, engagement of youth, empowerment of youth is really essential. There is a lot of conversation in this festival happening dedicated to this topic, that really youth is so important. But youth is the one that doesn't want military conflicts to happen because they want to have long life ahead of them. So they would prefer to find peaceful resolution to conflict. So if we make sure that youth, young voices are part of governance systems, they probably have less conflicts in the future. We need to transform our economic system, which means that we need to remove the power of monopolies, which perpetuate many of conflicts, so make structural violence prevail in the economic system. And we need to bring what we call regenerative and inclusive post-capitalist economy, which really establishes a different way of being that doesn't require conflicts to happen in the future. Cultural transformation, of course, is essential, and cultural transformation can happen through education, can happen through art, and part of cultural transformation is really bringing the new patterns of behavior at a mass scale, such as empathy, or, for example, recognizing that we're living in longer now in the perspective which has some future perspective, but also historical perspective, and we understand ourselves as part of that bigger chain of events. We start seeing, okay, how is our current conflicts and our desires placed in that context, and how we make sure that we recognize long-term consequences of our actions. We need to start healing roots of violence, and of course, we need to see how technologies can contribute to this. Can, for example, artificial intelligence or open source technologies be part of the solution? And they definitely are, and that is part of the roadmap that we have created. So in terms of drivers, I have already mentioned that probably the key drivers are coming from the bottom up of society, and they are related to educational and cultural and artistic and media effort that start transforming the collective consciousness, including the bringing of empathy culture, promoting of what we can call planetary consciousness, or what some people call planetizenship. That's one aspect. The democratization and, of course, bringing empowering of people, groups that can make the transition happen is really essential. And using technologies that are helping this transition happen can be engineer peace. Yes, it's part of the solution, but it's not the whole solution. It requires other components, which we can call soft components, to be enacted as well. And enablers such as transformation of our economy, transformation of governance systems, and different forms of cultural healing are essential for this transition. They are not the basis of the driving process, but they are extremely important if we move into the peaceful futures. And of course, this vision needs to be based on certain principles and values, and perhaps many of these values are not very new. There is nothing revelational about them, like recognizing that we need to amplify the potential of life and love in our society. But if we can bring these principles down to the design, for example, of our social system, socio-technical system, that can change a lot. And actually the question is, how do we make processes that, for example, are love and life amplifying is a big, big question. And also regenerative, reciprocal, care-based, inclusive. These are all elements of the future we need to begin bringing into being if we want peaceful futures to prevail. And education. There has been a lot of discussion how education can play into this. And of course, education is the key driving force of transformation. It has been massively underutilized. So if we want peaceful future to happen, we need to tap into the potential of education for young people and for adults as the driving force of this transformation. And let me conclude by saying that, of course, there are many things that can bring this change, but we need to remember that in the biggest sense of a word, we are invited to see a different reality. And I think that the words that were said about 60 years ago by Martin Luther King during his Nobel Prize speech are still very relevant. He says that we need to see that peace represents a sweeter music, a cosmic melody, which is far superior to the discords of war. And he said that if we want to make that music happen in our society, we need to change our social and our economic structures to shift from arms race to peace race. How can we make sure that new structures amplify peace? That is, I think, the role of peaceful futures, as inviting that this journey, yes, it's possible. There are sensible actions we can undertake. The effort takes all of us, and it needs to begin now. Thank you very much. And perhaps before moving further, maybe you can also start using the chat. I'm really inviting you to do that. And with your commentary. And as part of the story, I would like also maybe to, for you to understand which definition of peace really resonated with you most. Like, was it number one, which is absence of wars, or was it number two, which is eradication of systemic violence, or was it number three, which was like the state of harmonious being? So maybe type 1, 2, 3 just to see like what is your version of it. And as you're typing, I'm also going to introduce next speakers. And yeah, I can see some people saying type 2, eradication of systemic violence. Yes, I think it's really where we are heading. All three. It's really where we are heading, because the absence of wars, we know that this has not been enough. That's what we evidently see. And as part of the story that we already, as part of the effort that we already are undertaking, we really see that there is a need to change the story of what is happening. How can we find a new story, the story of peaceful futures, into reality? The storytelling seems to be an essential component in everything we do. It's surfaced again and again as the key topic. And like I said, young people contribution to make sure these stories come from young voices. And as part of the effort with our colleagues from Next Generation Foresight Practitioners, we now have a group that is actively working on creating those stories. And I would like to invite Thijs, who leads this effort, to share some of the current findings. Of course, we're still work in process, but what do you think is the message? What is that story that emerges?
Thank you so much, Pavel. Yeah, as Abby mentioned before, like the NGFP network really emerged from this eagerness for better, fairer, and more equitable futures. And this is this can only be achieved if these futures are democratically co-created by people from all generations, genders, geographies, areas of expertise, and walks of life. And to us, this means making efforts in two different fronts. One is really to enlarge spaces like this and invitations so that a broader and more diverse group of people can participate in the co-creation of futures. But the second one is to also create parallel or exclusive spaces for certain groups which had been historically marginalized, such as youth, to meet amongst themselves and feel safe to express their viewpoints, and sometimes in ways that are not so common in the status quo. And in these protected spaces, some nuances will emerge in a way that they wouldn't in broader environments, or at least not yet. And then the next step is really to find ways to combine these different views created in different spaces in such a way that we find our commonalities, our complementarities, and truly co-create meaningful futures for all. And so the intention with the Peaceful Futures Manifesto is to create the safe space for 11 members of the NGFP network to imagine a peace-based civilization 50 years from now by using storytelling. And what unites them is the fact that they are young professionals to the futures and foresight space. And we chose to produce a collection of stories of what a peace-based civilization looks like, with this intention not only to activate their left brain, meaning their analytical capacity and their critical thinking, but also their right brain, or their intuition and creativity. And we wanted these participants to combine their expertise, be it on food systems, climate, nuclear security, development, art, to their personal backgrounds, living in various parts of the world, and their imagination as they produce these kind of fictional scenarios of a 2075 peaceful future. And in the storytelling workshop, besides of sharing some basic storytelling techniques with them, I conducted a visualization exercise based on this holographic idea that all times coexist. And in that sense, there would be no such thing as a definitive past, present, and future, but endless possibilities. And what we experience as the present is the point in the hologram where our consciousness is at the moment. So through storytelling, I invite participants to suspend this belief and through their consciousness really connect with that part of them that already experienced that preferred future. Now, I find that in future work, speculative storytelling can never be taken too rigidly to the point that we become quite literal in our understanding and lose layers of meaning. Not too naive to immerse ourselves completely into these fictional worlds and then lose contact to our current reality. So there's a fine balance as like the right attitude that I believe is most useful when we apply speculative storytelling into futures and foresight work. And I can give you then some examples of what is emerging from these stories that we are co-creating in the Peaceful Futures Manifesto. So when a story tells us about a kangaroo sat at a valley during sunset, talking telepathically with a young woman in 2075, we probably shouldn't be too focused on the fact that it is a kangaroo talking to a human, neither discard it altogether as something that is very weird happening in another planet. To me, this is a story about a culture in which communications knows no language barriers, and where humans are not the only ones being valued for their knowledge and their expertise. And this is the aspect that is aspirational enough for us to imagine a peaceful future world, but it's still connected to what we already know, so we can take next steps and move forward in this preferred direction. I have some other examples. An oak tree who once died and is made alive in the future thanks to a painting that reproduced its main traces. This, to me, the story signals ways for native species regeneration, or an owl that acts as a mediator for conflict resolution between the 5 different living kingdoms as they all sign a world treaty. This is potentially grasping at legal representation for all living beings, which is something that we are already discussing in the present. Gamers producing memes to decrease the likelihood of violence emergence in an already peace-based civilization suggests a continuous increase in the power of social media, whatever form it takes in 50 years. Or a man being terrified by joy, love, and a deep sense of community, and finally finding it irresistible and thinking how come it took so long for him to experience that, give us some hint about the work that must be done on masculinities if we are to live in a peace-based civilization. So now I'm going to stop with spoilers because writers are still currently working on their stories. I'm eager to share the whole manifesto with you soon. But what I like to imagine is that this collection of stories, when they are out in the world, more people from diverse backgrounds will read them, and this will potentially resonate with them, feed their own areas of expertise, personal experience, and imagination, and enable new conversations in different spaces, new stories to be told, and new possibilities of peaceful futures emerging from this nurturing virtual cycle that we can create through storytelling. So in that way, we will keep bringing more and more light and consciousness to those parts of us which are already experiencing these futures as their current realities. Thanks, Pavel.
Thank you, Thais. Sounds very inspirational, and this really bridges to the conversation we had about an hour ago when we spoke about the power of imagination to really see into this possibility, the possible futures, and how we can tap into our imaginational capacity to discover the pathways into making peace-based futures real. And I wanted to invite Elijah, who is the member of Next Generation Foresight Practitioners network. Elijah, you have been with this project for basically since the start, and I would like you to cover what do you think is the role of foresight in making peaceful futures happen? Like, why do we need to cultivate future literacy, future thinking capacity broader in our system? Because that also surfaced as one of the like keys to the pathways to peaceful future. What do you think is the role, especially of younger practitioners that are using this kind of methodologies?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Pavel. Hi, everyone. I'm Elijah Blackwell, a Next Generation Foresight Practitioner Fellow at the School of International Futures, and I'm based in New Mexico in the United States. I'm also the director of VZOR Lab, a strategic foresight and immersive design consultancy. Most recently, my work has been exploring how do we enable inclusive decision-making processes as climate migration shapes the futures of civic engagement and belonging. So through participating in the Peaceful Futures sessions and currently writing short speculative fiction to bring to life the insights from these scenarios from different personas. So in this process, I've been reflecting on the implications that Peaceful Futures has on young foresight practitioners and how there's a vital role to play in shaping more inclusive systems and managing transformative societal change. One of the first insights that came up for me in this process was just how important it is to build the capacity for collective visioning and collaborative governance that center youth. Youth foresight practitioners in particular can explore how futures literacy efforts can be more accessible to and prioritize youth perspectives in peace building efforts and education systems more broadly. The complex, multidimensional issues we're facing, from climate change to existential poverty, require interdisciplinary roles and teams to solve them. So there's similarly this need for our education system to shift to be less siloed and more fluid and cross-disciplinary. So young foresight practitioners can play a vital role in guiding this participatory systems transition process in a way that meets the needs of youth in particular. Another key insight is just this power of facilitating youth-led collective visioning to inform inclusive multilateral decision-making. So young foresight practitioners can advocate for long-term systemic change by highlighting the importance of addressing root causes of conflict and promoting sustainable peace-building efforts. So there's this massive opportunity to build networks and coalitions between different stakeholders such as government, civil society, and business to increase the impact and effectiveness of a lot of these efforts to advance more peaceful futures. And there's also this emerging clear need for social infrastructure that bolsters communal efficacy. So communities in transition require oftentimes a strong social infrastructure to foster a sense of belonging and identity in a time of crisis. And emerging research has shown that a community's ability to successfully recover after a natural disaster depends on the level of collective efficacy that exists. And so youth holding spaces for collective visioning that informs pathways to co-create peaceful futures can spark social movements and create the social infrastructure that's needed to push the boundaries of what we think is possible when we think about the future of peace building. And this informs another key insight that I think is just really profound in how innovating culturally responsive foresight frameworks to advance intersectional movements is needed and a key role that young foresight practitioners can play. So there's this opportunity to develop new methods and techniques that bring perspectives to the field of foresight and peace building that haven't been centered in these spaces previously. So reconnecting with ancestral, traditional, and natural ways of knowing to create more culturally responsive foresight frameworks in and of itself can make this field more accessible to and advance futures literacy efforts that I think are needed to have our systems be able to adapt in the rapid ways that we're going to need them to over the upcoming decades. So exploring how immersive speculative art and emerging digital technologies and platforms can amplify the voices of marginalized communities and youth to visualize pathways to preferred futures and also evaluate the impact of efforts to advance peace building and hold cross-sector stakeholders accountable is key here. So the speculative storytelling has historically played a major role in inspiring and sustaining social movements, and youth tapping into the collective imagination can be a really powerful vehicle for change.
Brilliant. And one thought that I had as I was listening to you, Elijah, I was thinking about actually connecting some of the other efforts that are supported by Learning Planet right now, including the Imagination movement that is bringing some of these efforts, and also the Youth by Youth movement. We definitely benefit from the knowledge of next generation practitioners. And I'm thinking about what if like the first question is what if we start imagining that we are all learning this literacy? Can we bring it into those networks? So I think we should consider this as maybe one of the efforts for this year. And yeah, keep on. It's really interesting question. Like, what are the personas that we can channel to also tell the story? Because you're talking about like how the storytelling actually informs us. I think we will hear about the artistic aspects of like making that transition happen in a short while. But I first wanted to invite Yanis Lauris, who was representing the other side, more scientific, academic side. Yanis, you're one of people who on one hand are really deeply in academia and like a system scientist for many decades. At the same time, you are an action-oriented scientist. You're always at the edge where you try to bring all that research into practice to make sure it positively impacts the society. So you worked with us on using the strategical democratic dialogue and many other methods that really help us advance the understanding. And what can you share with us how you see this kind of work working and what tools can support us?
Yeah, thank you, Pavel. I think it's interesting that I represent an organization that was not originally a partner, but joined as a partner and became like an equal and respectful partner in this project. And this would be my first observation. I would like this to repeat with many others. So we need a design in which newcomers become players. That's my main message today. We need a replication process. Now, just a few words about Future World Center. We are based in Cyprus. It's the logo is interesting because it's composed of intermingled circles, and it has two kinds of meanings. One is that we are all interrelated, and there is this intermingling between the virtual existence and the real, the physical existence. But it's also the different circles that are different people from different backgrounds, different interests. We are all together, the environment as well, and everything. So the logo itself already say something about the organization. Now, the organization doesn't have a specific focus on any domain, but the motto is that we want to change the world in a positive way using technology and surgical interventions. So this is what attracts me in this project, because we are talking about philosophically how to change the world, but we are also trying to find the leverages in order to make the intervention. Future World Center runs a lot of projects. We have implemented more than 100 funded projects by all kinds of organizations, funding organizations. And our biggest expertise is in structured democratic dialogue. And this is also the tool that we are putting forward when we are requesting funding, and somehow it works. I mean, the funders are always attracted and we get some extra points for that. And that's our secret of winning so many grants. Now, about the specific question that Pavel asked me to share ideas about tools that can support our shift to peaceful futures, I want to share very specific ideas here. One is that we really need to publicize our work. And when I say publicize it, I don't mean only widely. I don't mean about disseminating one report, but I'm talking about taking little pieces of the work, like I wrote in the chat, like a single message, for example. Every individual from us can put it in a social media and publicize only that angle, but also then mention that this is part of a larger initiative, which is called Peaceful Futures. And we need to have a link so that people can read more about this project and join that project. So publicize it widely, but also in different ways, in small pieces, all part of a bigger picture. The second message I want to share with you is that we really need to connect or engage with global organizations. So once we are ready, somehow we need to get started. Of course, we have the UN in mind, we have the EU in mind, and so on, but maybe we should begin with smaller organizations, like regional organizations, governments, governmental organizations, Council of Europe, whatever. I mean, we need to make a list of all kinds of organizations with which we could begin talking about it. The third message I want to share is that we did something between August and today. We had a well-developed approach which emerged and changed a little bit during the process. So we need to repeat that with other people. So there are people all over the world who are very interested about this. So how can we create spin-offs? I mean, even the same process, but with different people in different regions of the world. Can we repeat it? I have some ideas about that. I even invited one person, but he's not online now, from Pakistan, who is very much interested. He's a young person. So we can do it, for example, in individual countries. Doesn't always need to be multinational. Now, I am becoming a more active member of the International Society for the System Studies, the ISSS, and I am promoting this idea that the ISSS has a role to play globally, because the ISSS represents scientists and practitioners who are developers of either science or methodologies or tools that use systemic thinking. And this is what we need. But these people are not really on the ground. They are not working on the ground. So there is space to mobilize them. And I think we can strategize on how to get them on board to do something. It might not be exactly the same dialogue like we did, but it could be a dialogue about what can they do or what obstacles do they face, and maybe we can facilitate it together. Now, in parentheses, I am informing you that I have been nominated to run for president if I am elected. And of course, I can get some help from some of you if you are members of ISSS, or if you would be willing to become members. But I am also promoting the idea that Pavel makes a presentation of this project in one of the symposia. There are weekly symposia, virtual symposia that take place in which new ideas are being presented. and they are looking for ideas. So I sent you an email about this, Pavel, but I didn't get the response. I think it would be better if somebody else rather than me promotes this idea that is not directly involved in the process. That's why I thought maybe Alexander Laszlo could make the suggestion, and then I can back it up because I know the current president, and I can say, I was also a member of this and I fully support it. But I think it would be great to present it in that community and then use that as our opportunity to engage them in a dialogue in which they will talk about what their role is in supporting this kind of efforts, in becoming more active and engaged in making the world a better place. To do all these things, we need to maybe standardize or automate our process. So we might need to kind of describe the process, even maybe write a scientific publication about how we went about it. I mean, what were the stages, the phases, the investment, the hours, the number of participants, and so on. And finally, I am suggesting that because the next phase of the project is so important, and there are so many things that we could do, we could organize another dialogue in which we ask all people who have participated for ideas. What should we do with this data? How can we use it? And what kind of tools do we need? Now, among the many tools that exist, I think the majority of the tools, I mean, we could also make a catalog of tools. I mean, we could ask the community, our community, what are the tools that are helping us? For example, the tool we are using now, Zoom, is a very important tool. So these kind of tools are also important. But then there are more structured tools, like the Jira, like the ones we used during our workshops, like Idea Prism and Cogniscope and Concertina that are used with structured dialogue. Maybe there are other tools that the ISSS Society has out there, and we need to find them. So it's good to start like a collection of tools. So I think that's what I wanted to share.
Oui, salut, tu vas bien? Oui, j'ai bien vu ton message. Okay. Alors, c'est pourquoi? Pour les dates.
I think it was not directed at us. Wasn't a commentary to our team, our group. Yanis, thank you. Excellent number of ideas, and I think that we will be able to explore all of these avenues in the last 25 minutes that we will have remaining as we are kind of approaching the end of our cycle of presentations and sharings. I think there is already a lot of ideas brewing in the space. And I can see how we can also establish connections between multiple initiatives that are trying to bring this effort into reality. We have spoken a number of times about the role of artistic community and groups that work with cultural transformation. And VZOR Lab is actually, that's the mission of founders of VZOR Lab, to work with this dimension. And Anna, I know you have quite a lot to share about the ideas that emerged and maybe will be taken as a next step in development of this project. So please.
Yeah, Pavel, thank you. I will just show some, as I'm responsible for the artistic part, I will show you some images. Yeah. So as Pavel already said, I will just take a moment for the cultural transformation that at all the levels we need new patterns of behavior, and that's what we discussed a lot in our sessions in families, at home, personal culture, and creating and transforming cultural attitudes within the states and with our planet. And as talking about arts, you know, it's always hard to say what artists have to do to, for example, for peaceful futures, because we cannot say arts what they have to do, but artists have tools and practices that with the different other disciplines can work for our common peaceful futures. And here are some examples that we can use. In education, what we were talking a lot within the structured democratic dialogue, and that was one of the core ideas within the education, that we need tools for teaching dialogue and critical thinking. And that's the thing that artistic subjects can really help. And when we are talking, we VZOR are talking about arts, we are mostly talking about interdisciplinary practices, when art is interconnected with social issues, with new technologies, with different, with the bioart, with sciences, and and there are a lot of questions about ethics, bringing up and about the attitudes and about the behaviors and about some communities. And what artists can do, they can educate, they can teach, give teaching to young and adults. That what we also had programs about that, transforming where people can come, learn, and transform their concepts, their feelings about something, their aggression, their attitude to anything, with artistic tools, and make some installations or concepts with artistic expressions. Also, the other thing that is really important, that artists are using this critical approach to like contemporary art, use critical approach, and what artists can do, they can do the experiments, and we can experiment with anything and find out and highlight some questions, not with no terrible circumstances, but highlight the questions by means also of artistic techniques. The other thing where art has really great tools is what I called it, like communicative glue within the communities. There are different practices like art therapy, like some healing practices, painting, a lot of interdisciplinary practices that can support the communities, and that can be really this communicative tool and inspirational tool for communities forming within the cities, within small towns, and even within like the international communities. The other thing is interaction. What artists can do and what they actually are exploring now with new technologies, especially, is new languages of communication with people, with humans within each other, like dialogues and interactions between citizens and cities, and dialogues between people and nature. There are lots of projects that are researching in these languages, like how can we better understand our nature? How can we better see the memories of our cities? How can we better visualize our future within our cities, within our gardens? And also what artists are doing right now and experimenting with is technology, of course. And I think there is a huge field to be explored with the democratization of technologies. I called it that way because they're working with artificial intelligence a lot. That is sometimes scaring people, but it can be used as other tools for co-creation and for co-learning, and also be the open source tools for community art and for community learning. And of course, like technology-based art and contemporary art and any kind of art, I think it might be always about prototyping. That is what we're talking about, that what Thais was talking about, this speculative storytelling and storytelling through the installations, through the projects, through the concepts of artists, it's it can be really very powerful when these stories are visualized, where you can touch it, where you can feel it. And for example, we are in the beginning of the project, Peaceful Futures, the very first workshops, there was an idea to create peaceful gardens for people within the urban places. And that is where artists, together with scientists, together with people and communities, can design really new, updated, better, like socio-communicative places. So this is not all, but these points that I showed you, I think these are the bases that already exist, and that are tools and practices that can be spread and can be used and can be applied for our better and peaceful futures. Thanks, Pavel.
Excellent. And I particularly find it really inspirational, the idea of dedicated peaceful spaces. In education, Montessori approach, they have an idea that every classroom should have a peace table. And whenever there is a conflict in the classroom, and even a person that cannot resolve this conflict, he or she goes to that peace table and stays there. And then the other part of the other party of the conflict can join, and then the teacher can support them. So they know there is a space where they can go to restore themselves and to bring back the harmony in the relationship between them. Now, this can happen at every classroom, and it's like a little model of what can happen in the city. If we have a dedicated space, if we have dedicated space in the organization, if we have dedicated space in the city, like Peace Garden, a place to go where people can restore their tranquility and also find place to peacefully resolve conflicts that they have. So that is a beautiful idea. And I think if every city has a space like this will really change a lot. So really curious about exploring, can we make that into a kind of movement of artists? Like, can they be inspired to, okay, have a peace garden in our location? Something like of that kind. Brilliant. And last speaker that I wanted to invite before moving into like brainstorming of ideas, what we can do next, is actually another partner that helped us evolve, is the movement called Eco-Civilization. And we have Robert Schramm, who was really active during the whole series of workshops. And Robert, looking from the perspective of a movement that tries to kind of bring the idea of a new civilizational paradigm, where do you see the role of initiatives such as ours and how we can amplify each other?
Yeah, thank you, Pavel. So looking through the lens of eco-civilization, I think that I want to start with taking a look at root causes and finding symptoms of problems and solutions. So, and the difference, what I'm exactly trying to tell here is that, like, we want to produce less CO2 worldwide, but we are actually not changing our consumption mechanism based models on economic growth. So to start with that, the question comes up for us: what lies at the possible root and origin of a solution, and which steps do we need to get to the solution? And I feel that with our participation, eco-civilization, and through the whole trajectory, the outcome of the Peaceful Futures report shows very clearly how we can backtrack a process to an ultimate solution that is presented to the sort of origin part where we would start. So let's review this first, and I can share the screen to sort of explain it visually.
Yeah, Robert, but just like to be aware that we already are kind of approaching the final stage, so maybe like 5 minutes in total.
I will keep it short, thanks. So if you can see my screen, this is an overview, a map of the result that we sort of came to when we discussed 61 solutions and ideas during these 6 or 7 workshops that we had, these think tank processes. And what you can see here is that basically there are 9 levels. I think Yanis or you, Pavel, are more able to explain how the procedure works, because I think it's a special tool that we used. But basically, out of these 61 ideas came a number of crucial steps to make. And at the top, you can see what it takes to get to ending existential poverty. You have to go down 9 levels in total to get to the root origin of the solution. And very interesting, as seen through this lens, is that we could sort of analyze and reflect on the fact that we should start with teach critical systems and thinking and dialogical learning. So basically, you have to start here, and we have to go through all the other elements of the solutions to basically get to the top one. And I think this is the most interesting part that we sort of went through. I can stop sharing the screen because it sort of shows that if you would sort of skip a part of a solution, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I can stop sharing. So I'm sorry, my camera is acting a bit weird, but this is something that happened lately. So I can also turn it off if it doesn't work. So basically these results, as we flashed them, they have a profound and a major impact on activism and movements, as it shows very clearly how layered the solutions are. So movements can learn from this, and they can evaluate their type of activism and also review how effective they really are. Because groups can sort of evaluate, are we still fighting symptoms? And do the movement subconsciously create division into the process? You know, they offer partial solutions and usually compete with other movements proposing different solutions. So it also shows which route to take to get to the root of their solution and how it will affect the strategy. So to keep it short, the second few minutes is it would be very interesting to research this more and also to find out where these evolutive processes are mostly blocked, and then analyze those situations and create special task forces to intervene in most critical contexts. So looking at our diagram I just showed, you could flip the question and ask what is blocking reaching the goal, the ultimate goal 61, ending existential poverty. And perhaps the last question could be that rises, how do we enable inter-movements activism? And the results of the report might lead us to gain a better understanding of how matters are actually related. So, and I think focusing on SDG 17, finding partners for the goals, it can also be crucial in the process. You know, if we focus on these different ideas as in-between steps to get to a solution, we can sort of create a chain of solutions, a soul chain, or you might call it a solver chain, like a blockchain works. So I think that this basically completes the reflection, and I hope that all that's been shared here by all the speakers today is inspiring for our coming discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Fantastic. So a lot of ideas, I think, have been already flowing around. And if any of you feel like you want, first of all, to put a clarifying question, you're welcome to do it. But if you're ready to step into the next stage, I suggest that we open up the floor. I had in mind the possibility of actually going into breakouts, but I feel like maybe it will be productive that we just stay in the same room, and I would just invite some of the sharing of ideas. Let's focus on the year 2023 and 2024. What are the most impactful efforts that we can do together. And of course, like we are not yet, or probably will not be billionaires, so we will not expect a massive inflow of resources immediately into this initiative right now. But we still, so it means that we need to think about something that is cost effective. But at the same time, let's think about what is possible. And Yanis, you have already highlighted the idea of what if we actually conduct sessions or like replicate the process that we went through with a number of youth movements. And I think that's like one of the possibilities where we can start. But let's explore what are those avenues that we see if we are doing
a little bit on that,
yeah.
Pavel, because you mentioned the financial challenge. The financials, we need them in order to organize events. But if we have other people taking the initiative and doing most of the work, it's the equivalent of having the money. We don't need to have the money.
Of course, I mean, we still probably need some money for coordination and promotion, but in terms of let's say relative investment, contribution of movements, contribution of people is the most essential one. Of course, I'm not. That's why I'm not bringing really the financial constraint at the moment. Let's think about what is possible, what is needed, like what are the most impactful efforts. And let's maybe just do it in a kind of brainstorm. So I invite all of you to share what came to your mind. Maybe you can also express it as a concern, like as an unresolved question. So you listen to all of this and you think, okay, this is not going to work. Fine. Let's take it from that perspective. And maybe some of the voices that were not yet present, but Thais, please, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, no, just because when Yanis was talking about like standardizing the process and replicating the process, it really came to mind for me, this idea of like training of trainers. So if you have a little bit of resource to organize this into a sort of a master class where you record it and then you spread this idea, so you don't have to organize many events to teach the methodology, you have it recorded and then you spread it so other groups around the world can use the same methodology. And by doing that, we can even create some sort of like reporting where we can have organized way of collecting, results from these different groups and then kind of collating that together and comparing results across the world. So maybe, yeah, something like that. Training of trainers, masterclass, recording stuff so that we don't have to do everything live all the time.
Quick addition, training of trainers can also happen when two of us join another team and be their mentors.
All right. Yeah, certainly. And I think that can be an invitation to the youth movements that have been mentioned in our chat before, like Youth by Youth, IME, Imagination, and others.
Yeah, I think the subject of youth really is crucial, and although you're asking for what will happen in the short term, I think the impact of dealing with youth will not have a short-term impetus, but it really is the long-term impetus that we need to look for. And I think approaching educational authorities, approaching journals that are dedicated towards education, and putting together some kind of package which probably would include SDD as one of the tools, but certainly a way of promoting peace building in the classroom, or peaceful futures as a subject for education, I think will be really very, very important to do. And of course, training the trainers and cross-pollination of ideas would be very useful here. But I also think we have to look also at the other long-term aspects. And one of the ones which we discussed in the ideas was the issue of outlawing war. And I think that becomes very, very much something important in what we see what's happening in the world today. When we have all this talk about providing arms to Ukraine and helping them fight, but nobody mentions what's a terrible waste of all of this money and effort and people being injured and killed on a war that nobody needs other than perhaps Putin. So the idea that aggressive wars, which are something which can be outlawed in international law, I think is important. Of course, obviously, countries like America, Israel, Britain will pull back from that because they don't want to be accused of doing something which is a war crime. But I think if the world impetus is in that kind of direction, it will make a difference.
And I think what we have discussed a lot in our conversation through the autumn sessions was that legal system in general can become an important partner. And apart from the effort to criminalize war itself, it's also the idea that we need to recognize like legal rights of those groups that are kind of underprivileged, that don't have those voices right now, and also recognizing the legal rights of non-human entities. It's like that's also changing part of the story. Yeah, but all right, so you think that that's another initiative that we can take to the next stage in the next, let's say, couple of years, this year and next year. Thank you, Marcos. Any more suggestions, colleagues? Because I think there's a lot of, yes, Yanis, please. Welcome.
Yeah, I mentioned it before, but I want to bring it now as a serious suggestion that the ISSS and maybe other organizations also that we need to identify, maybe in COSE, I'm not sure, but the ISSS for sure, because it's an organization with 70-year history, many Nobel Prize people were members of this organization. So it has in the minds of people a big personality. We need to engage them. And in my latest interactions with all of them, with many of them, especially the older ones, those who are in the 70s and even older, they seem to have this desire and the understanding that they have the knowledge, they have the tools, but they don't share them with the world. And I think we somehow need to mobilize that voice. I don't know what is the best way to do it, but I think we have to start somewhere. And that's why I thought by you presenting the project to that community, that would be a good strategy to begin it like from the outside, not to begin from me who is inside, you know, and then I come and embrace it and mobilize some other people. We have also Alexander there, and then we create like an inside movement. And because I talked about it a year ago, about the need that this community has a responsibility and an obligation to the world to share their knowledge and their tools in order to make the world a better place. It was also part of my talk when we met in Washington, D.C. several years ago. I finished with that, and people remember that. So it all comes together now. It's the right moment to engage them. So I think that would be a good push. Now, I agree with all the other suggestions as well. And also what Marcus just said before, popular magazines, that's also a good output, you know, find some journalists. I mean, somebody has to write about, or many have to write about this project. Maybe we can begin with press releases. I mean, like half a page press releases that we develop centrally, but then every one of us adds another paragraph about their country or their organization and sends it to regional newspapers. And this way the project gets to be disseminated. But we need also some reference. So we need to have like a page about this project where they can go and find out more. Or in these press releases, we should also conclude with some kind of an open invitation that this can be replicated. But it shouldn't be long. It should be less than half a page maximum. That is, so that the world out there understands and is being empowered by knowing that there are people who take that seriously, and they spend a lot of hours talking without having anybody funding them significantly except for expenses, and they care about that. So there is a place where I can join. Now, if I put a period here and change the subject, I think we could raise significant funds on that. I mean, there are many times we talked about these significant funds, but I think that if we spin it off and make it bigger and make it more ambitious and bring more partners in it, we have like, let's say 50 partners in it across the world, and then go to Soros or people like that and ask for 50 million, I think we could. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's doable because everybody's worried about this situation. It's not only the war in Ukraine and Russia now. I mean, in general, the planet is 10 seconds before the final destruction. According to the clock of the end of life, we are 10 seconds away. Everything is increasing. So, and there are people who worry about it. And there are the majority who don't know about it, who don't really get it.
And perhaps don't even care. Like okay, we've been living.
Which is normal, you know, because I had a secretary, for example, a couple of years ago, and she quit and went to another job. And I said, why? I thought you were very, very happy here. She said to me, you know what, Yanni, being here, I understand how many problems the planet has and life has and my country has, because you remind me about this all day. I mean, everybody here talks about it all the time. I want to go to a job where I don't care. I don't care what happens tomorrow. I want to live the next years without knowing. So a lot of people are
like that. Pavel, the way in which you plan to advertise the results of Peaceful Futures, could it not be that we can get quality newspapers to write about the whole project, who was involved, how it came about? I mean, I think, as Anne says, this is the time now when people are interested in different viewpoints. And there's one or two newspapers in every country who, if it was properly presented, would probably write about it.
Yeah, I think this is the conversation to have with our colleagues also from School of International Futures about the plans to release the whole, let's say, package that we are preparing right now. And I absolutely agree that it has to be released in a way that it presents to the world that yes, there are these positions, there are this perspective, there is this view.
Because I think your presentation today is a very good start. I mean, I even though having been involved in the discussions, I think the way you presented it today was very clear and really captured the essence.
Oh, yes. Thank you. And yes, please.
Presentation is great. I mean, we don't need to postpone it until everything is ready. You know, the war is ongoing. So
yeah, of course,
we can begin with a press release, but then when we send the press release, we have a cover letter in which we say we would be happy if you want to cover it for a full page coverage, and you can talk to people from different countries and get their perspectives and make a full page article, and also talk about it from the perspective of your own country. I mean, localize it. So, for example, if I send this to Cypriot newspapers, I would tell them, this is a press release that came from a project that I participate, please publish it. But in the cover letter, I would say, I find this project very interesting, and it has relevance to Cyprus as well, because we are also in the danger of war all the time. So maybe you can take this initiative, this opportunity, and contact some of these people and make a full-scale article about people caring about the future of life in general. And you can localize it to Cyprus and ask questions. Also, a couple of Cypriots, bring a couple of Cypriots politicians in, interview them about the same questions, and then talk to people that are partners on this project and show their perspective and mix it up. It's like we're giving ideas to the journalists how to localize it. And we can do that now. We don't need to wait until the full report is ready.
Yeah, right now I'm sitting actually in Baku, and I think one of the first wars of the 2020s, which really triggered a lot of processes in the European continent, was between Azerbaijan and Armenia in 2020, when the decades-long conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh really was kind of shifted to the next stage, and Azerbaijani army took the big parts of the territory. But it was a conflict that was brewing for centuries, and in a way, before even collapse of Soviet Union, there was the war that really was one of the reasons why the Soviet Union collapsed. So this is the territory, okay, again, where these kind of peacemaking efforts will be highly appreciated, because it's one of those pain points of the Eurasian continent. And I can imagine there are many more. Like, I'm really concerned about this current situation between Turkey and Greece. Again, like for decades, there has been a frozen conflict. Now, people are very, very serious that 2023 can again become a hot conflict.
They are buying weapons every day.
Yeah. And these are both NATO countries, so I don't know what will be the protocols enacted by NATO if two NATO countries go into conflict with one another. It's a very open.
I will tell you what will happen. NATO and the UN, they will make a lot of statements, but they will not stop the war.
So I just want to say this is very fragile, and we are living into the situation where a lot of frozen conflict can unfreeze again. So we are rather like the issues are becoming urgent. Jessica, I can see your notes, so let me read it. I think a more participatory future is a peaceful future. So we need to make any shared materials or virtual in-person meeting more accessible to everyone. We also need to think about who is taking up space and who is not as we talk about the future. Yeah, absolutely right remarks. I think what I hear in the, yes, so is there a Zoom session recorded? Will it be replaced? Yes, so we are recording this session. We are about the end of the session right now. And I wanted to respond to what Jessica just wrote, but before that, to say that we're going to place this record and it will be available for wider distribution. So Jessica, I think what we are discussing here today is actually creating some kind of packages that will easily be distributed and coupled with the topic of train the trainers. I think it actually shows us that probably the best strategy right now is to make sure we have broader engagement. We have engagement from young people, first of all. Our role will be right now to actually focus on methodologies that help these kind of conversations occur in different contexts. Perhaps part of the story is where also we can have contribution from groups like Next Generation Foresight Practitioners. How do we use the tools of foresight to conduct this conversation? I'm thinking that practice of VZOR Lab shows that we really need to engage artists more actively and maybe catalyze some formats of artistic collaborations. Applied programs, as Anna indicated, initiated for teens discussing topics and creating artistic forms reflecting on that. So yeah, I feel like the direction, first of all, is that yes, it has to be about youth, and Marcus indicated it shouldn't be only about youth. So we also need to think about some activist practices working with legal system, and the biggest goal is to outlaw war as a practice. That's very ambitious, but I think it can happen. And indeed, a lot of work needs to happen around making sure the world knows about this initiative. So broadcasting it with our own social media resources, but also maybe engaging some local newspapers, journals, anyone who has contacts with journalists should start thinking about that. So I think it's a good plan, actually, really very nice one. On one hand, Yanis, what you suggest, let's elevate the level of this work and make sure we build up a very large consortium from a small seed consortium that we have right now, let's say from 6 to 60 organizations participating. It's very realistic. Focus on youth engagement and tool sets that help conduct these conversations led perhaps by youth and targeting youth. Working with educational institutions, bringing new methods of learning that help understand how we can move from, let's say, war futures to peace futures, or war music to peace music in terms of Martin Luther King, and artistic programs. I think it sounds like a very nice starting plan. Yanis, we are really reaching the end of the session, but please, I welcome the final remark.
I only wanted to introduce Hamza. He's there. He's from Pakistan. And he's actually the person who is programming Idea Prism, one of our tools. And today he asked me, he said, what you are doing is amazing. Can I join this community? So I said to him, join today and you will see, and maybe you can do something for Pakistan.
Welcome, Hamza.
Thank you, guys. It's really an immense pleasure for me to be part of this community. So, and I'm looking forward to work everybody closely. So, thank you.
Thank you, Hamza. And we just had a conversation yesterday here in Azerbaijan about possibility of doing something in Pakistan. So I think it's actually a very interesting direction of work which we can hold. All right. I think it was a very rich conversation. Thank you, everyone who contributed today. There were a lot of good ideas how we can proceed in the next year and maybe perhaps into 2024. If we are able to do everything we have been discussing today, we will be in a totally different situation in a year from now. So hopefully, but it's not only for us, but for the world. I think if we really make the world know, if there is a movement building up, if there is a vision that starts to spread, then the world will become more peaceful next year, hopefully. So let's make sure we are working towards that. And Marisa, again, the recording will be available after the session. It's recorded right now and it will be put online shortly after the session. So thank you very much. Have a very nice day and have a peaceful day, a peaceful year, a peaceful futures. Marisa, we will post it on Global Education Futures online, a YouTube account, and probably Learning Planet will also have it on their account. So thank you, and we will make sure the recording is getting distributed. So thank you very much for participating today.
Thanks, Pavel.
Thanks, Pavel. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.